if you're a drug addict, you know, when the way you quit is you quit in front of people and then you sneak. And so that's what I was doing. I was quitting in front of Toby and then sneaking all my problems until eventually I couldn't, you know, I was just, it got so crazy that I came home one day after being out all night and I tried to get the key in the door and I made a lot of noise and she opened the door and the two kids were there and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm a complete like drug addict and I just can't do this and I need you to, I don't know, I just need you to do anything. And she literally was like, great, we're going to school and I'm taking you to AA.
Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform where story by story, we explore the resiliency of the human spirit with people who are using their own personal journeys to leave a positive and transformative imprint on our world today. At the Podium holds a space for meaningful conversation, inspiration, and life. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with John Adams. John Adams is a filmmaker, musician, and actor. As writer, director, editor, cinematographer, and composer, he's collaborated with his creative partners, collectively known as the Adams family. Wife Toby Poser, and daughters Lulu and Zelda Adams on 8 feature films, including Where the Devil Roams on Tubi, Hellbender on Shudder, and The Deeper You Dig with Dark Sky Films. John is also the songwriter and instrumentalist for the band Hellbender. John, welcome to At the Podium.
Thanks for inviting me, Patrick. It's nice to talk with you.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. We haven't talked probably in a decade, realistically, I don't think.
I think you might be right. I think the last time we really just sat down was that you and I just went out to breakfast together.
Yeah, that was a
And
lifetime ago, it feels
that
like.
was quite a while back. But you've been
Wow.
traveling the world. Then actually after that, you pretty much traveled the world. You just took off. I think you went to like Hawaii
I
first.
was, yeah, I went to Hawaii, then I went to the Caribbean, and then Asia. I did the whole thing. I did the
Yeah,
whole thing.
dude. And I loved looking at the photos. I was like, oh my God, this is how it's done. And then we copied you and then we started jumping around the
You
world.
sure did. You hopped in that RV and like changed
Yeah,
changed everything when you guys did that.
true enough.
So I found this quote from you that I want to start with. Um,
Oh God.
yeah, here we go. Here we go. Buckle up, kids. um, you said, my first band was in high school. We were a punk band called Socially Inept. We practiced in our guitar player's basement until his mom heard the lyrics. I was the lyricist and the singer, so I was kicked out of the band and they became a hair band. My music career was off to a roaring start. I loved writing lyrics, but had trouble finding other people who shared my musical sensibilities. Basically, I got kicked out of a lot of bands, so I picked up the bass and began to write music, freedom. Since then, I've had wonderful times touring around the nation and spending countless hours in recording studios putting down songs. I love both the live element of performance and the solitude of the studio. And when I read that quote, I was like, this is a foreshadowing of the life that you and Toby and Lulu and Zelda have built over the past 15 years, this life of just creating your own content and being on the road. And it seems you've been doing that and breaking all the rules your whole life.
I don't know when I said that, but all of it's true. That's pretty cool. That I don't know where you found that, but yeah, it's 100%. And as you were reading it, I was like, yes, that's exactly, you know, luckily I have a family that loves breaking the rules too and doesn't want to ask for permission.
Yeah.
And our life now is centered around our filmmaking, and that all started for the exact same reason that I started playing the bass, which was Toby was an actress. We were living in Los Angeles. Hollywood is very unwise. They begin forgetting how great women are as they get older. And
Yep.
we wanted to make a movie and she was going to be the star. So we just made our own movie. We didn't ask for permission, and we broke the rules. But I think what's really important about that story is that when we were done with our movie, people said, "Hey, good job," and that encouraged us to keep going. So, in one sense, we did it all ourselves, but without kind of companionship and some beautiful people patting us on the back and saying, "Hey, do another one. You know, you need that too."
So, John, you don't know this, so I'm telling you this and now. You've been on my mind a lot the past few months. And I'll tell you why, for a really strange reason, because you know how there's been this whole rebirth of like the supermodels back in the day from like Naomi Campbell and Linda Evangelista and Christy Turlington, and all those women are sort of back in a big way. And there's been this huge nostalgia for what that world was like in the 90s in New York, which I think was a very special time. And I thought about you because you, in one iteration of your life, were a very successful model in New York, and which was very unusual even back then for men to sort of climb to that sort of level where you were. I mean, you were doing campaigns for Giorgio Armani, Gucci, Calvin Klein, Alexander Julian, and then you were in all the editorials, in GQ and Louisville Vogue and Esquire. And I wonder what you remember from that time and how you feel about that time in the city in New York.
Well, I remember how lucky I was. I remember knowing that I was lucky. I remember being very thankful that I got to travel around the world, because that would have been really the only way I could have done that, and the way I traveled was really, I would wake up and literally be in Marrakesh with Giorgio Armani and his crew, and I would know, you are so lucky.
Yeah.
And I really loved it. I was lucky that I got hooked into some really great people. And those people were people like Jim Moore from GQ, Giorgio Armani, obviously, Calvin Klein. And like Francois Hollard, a great photographer. And they treated me really well. They were super loyal to me. John Varvatos was another person who was really great to me. The 90s were incredible. I look back, I see the pictures, I see how people look at the 90s now. I knew I was lucky when I was there. And when I look back, I can see how lucky we all were. It was a great, time for fashion. I don't really know what the fashion world is like now, but people cared about it back then. I mean, I obviously people still care about fashion, but there was something. But the women were far bigger. It was the only job in the entire world where men were less paid, less looked at, less. It's like women ruled it. And those women that you're talking about were great. Like, they were superstars. They were bigger than actresses at the time. They were bigger than politicians. They were really cool. There was a bunch of them that were very cool, and the art was great.
Yeah.
You look back at those photos, Patrick Demarchier and Fabrizio Ferri, and it's terrific stuff.
I love that they weren't actresses. They weren't famous in another way. They were just known because they knew how to make, and even you guys knew how to make the clothes live, and you were muses for these designers, which is very different than how the industry seems to work today.
Yeah, I think so. That was really fun about being a model at that time. It was something that I liked, was they did treat you like you were kind of an artist, and that was great. Obviously, it was based on our looks, so it wasn't like deep art, like being a painter or being a musician or something, but it did feel good. But I wanted more. I definitely wanted more. When I was a model, I knew I want more. I want to give more. It's not I want more. It's more like I want to give more. I want to be more of an artist, that my mind is doing something.
In 1994, you were diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and your modeling career essentially stopped.
Yes, it did.
It essentially stopped, and you were so young. You were sort of at the height of your career as a model, and I wonder for you, do you remember the day that you got that diagnosis?
Oh yeah. I'll do my best not to get emotional, but yeah. So I mean, there's so many things in that question that you're asking. It's such a complicated question, and it's a great question. So yeah, I mean, I remember the day I found out that I had cancer, and here's what's to me what's most important about the question is that I had a big lump in my neck. It's a real funny story leading up to it, but I won't go into it because it's a little long. But they took a needle biopsy out of my neck, and then they said, yeah, it looks like it's going to be cancer, so we're going to cut it out and we'll call you. And it was on Thursday when they cut out this big thing out of my neck, and I had to wait all the way until Monday. So anyone who's had cancer knows that that's actually the hardest part of anything, is waiting, because you're going to find out whether you're going to find out how bad your cancer is, and they're going to say something that's terrifying and out of your control. They're going to tell you whether you have a chance to live, or they're going to tell you that you're going to die. And that's anybody who goes through this process, even if they're told, hey, guess what, it wasn't cancer. Those days from the day they cut your tumor out to the day they tell you what you got, those are the most terrifying of all. They're the hardest ones to get through. That's where you really got to dig deep down into your heart and get through every second. So when the doctor called, he said, I was waiting. I had waited the whole weekend, and the doctor called. I picked up the phone. He said, hey, it's Dr. Gabriel. And John, is anybody with you? And I was like, all right. And I was speechless, because I knew that if he was asking me that, I was in some big trouble.
Yeah.
And I couldn't speak for a second. He was like, John, are you there? And finally, I squeaked out a yes. And then he told me the deal. And what I remember about it was that actually a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I was like, all right, this is the meaning of my life. And I'm gonna live. And that was that. And so I had the meaning of life. Like, people, Toby and I were just talking about this today, because we were talking about, I have friends who are getting cancer now 30 something years later, right? And I was 25, and I had to, and it was such a mind bender. But it was great, because I got my meaning of life. And a lot of people search and maybe never find the meaning of life, but I found the meaning of life when I was 25. And ever since then, every single minute has been incredibly important. And that mostly turned into being like how I want to be a lover to my wife, and how I want to be a father to my kids. And like, people say things like, oh, I wish I could go back because I missed some of my kids' childhood. And I'm like, I didn't miss anything. Now they're both in college, and I didn't miss a second. And cancer, I thank cancer for that.
What was that like, if you can talk about it, to sort of really face your mortality? Because you said from there you found the meaning of your life, which was manifested with your family. And then did you have any kind of faith practice or spiritual paradigm to fall back on to sort of help you through the information and then the 10 months of chemo that followed after that?
Nope, I didn't. I actually went to school. I was a religion major in school, but by the time I was 25, I just was someone who was thankful to be alive, but I didn't have any religious structure. And but I still have a deep thanks for being alive. And so it's a great question. And that part was very hard, because I didn't want to die. And I really wanted to live. And I really wanted, like, love. I didn't have love at that time. And that meant a family and somebody I loved. And I was worried that I would die without that. But that was one of the reasons that I fought. So it's very mundane, what I use, it's not, it was a nasty, mean fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't have anything extremely philosophical other than I wanted to find love.
Mhm.
So that was it.
We must have met right after you had gone through that. So we met
Yeah,
in mid
right.
90s, when you and Toby, who would later become your wife, started dating. And when I met you, you were fronting your band Banana Fish. Do you remember that? You
Oh,
play,
absolutely. Absolutely.
you're fronting Banana Fish, and you would sing at the clubs in your underwear,
Yeah.
which I thought that
A
was
nice
so
tight
cool.
G-string. It was great. The nice thing about coming out on a G-string was it just completely disarmed everybody. They thought, oh my God, what the hell is happening here?
You,
And if somebody in your G-string, you're pretty harmless. You know what I mean? So it's very disarming and wonderful. Everyone's suddenly relaxed or
you
extremely nervous.
they were like, "What's happening?"
What's happening here? This is wrong.
But I wonder, why didn't you go back to modeling after that period? Why did because your life shifted obviously, but why didn't you go back to the modeling thing?
I think so what happened was I was on top of my game. Like we were saying before, I was working with Armani. I was just about to shoot a campaign with Kate Moss for Calvin Klein when I found out I had cancer, and I didn't have insurance. And so I had to go to a clinic. I had to go broke.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't, so when I was done after a year of chemo and radiation, I didn't have any money. I'd also lost, I was already a thin dude and I had lost 20 or 30 pounds. And I really had learned like I said, the meaning of my life. And it was definitely not, I want to be a model, or I want to look fabulous, or I want to have a nice suit, or I want to have nice rugs, or I want to live in a nice apartment. That was not what I wanted anymore.
Hmm.
And because all that stuff was taken from me. And I saw how useless it was. And I also saw how, and I understand this, I don't feel any anger or anything about it, but I saw how quickly the world that I was a fixture in evaporated. So I saw what was important, and the only thing that was important. This sounds cheesy, but it's really not. Was like I just want to kind of have genuine love. I want to share like the gift of life with somebody, so that we can both recognize that we're in the gift of life.
Hmm.
And so modeling, I did a couple modeling jobs afterwards. Actually, John Varvatos gave me a job, even though I was, banged up from cancer. He was very nice. He was somebody who, in spite of the bad image of having cancer and people knew about it, he gave me a job anyway, paid me. I lived off that money for a little while. But I wanted something more. I wanted something more. I wanted to be creative. That's really the answer. I think it was just too hollow. There was nothing to go back to.
Banana Fish is interesting because that was almost a decade where you were really in Banana Fish, making music for Banana Fish. And I wonder if you look back at the first quote that I read, you've been making music your whole life. And even now, music, I've seen the videos of you and Zelda and Toby making music together. And I wonder, what is it about music and being in a band and that sort of creative gesture what is so important to you about that? What is it giving you?
That's a great question. Well, I think it's also important to point out, like, my music career never went to the place that I wanted it to. And
Hmm.
what's great about where I am now, like, I was never like, I wanted to be more successful, but I wasn't. And now looking back, like, I really fought hard. I really gave a lot for it, and I really loved it. I loved the whole process. But it never really succeeded. What's very interesting is, now I'm a filmmaker with my family, and now I look back and I realize, oh, that was just a part of growing into a filmmaker, because now I write music for our films. Now they're a major part of our filmmaking, and I have a band with my girls, like me, Toby, Lulu, and Zelda are in a band called Hellbender, and actually that's more successful than anything I ever did, and by far. And so life's a process,
Mm.
and I'm glad I stuck with the process. And Toby was there to support me in the process. Like when I was like, I don't know, like I'm just sleeping on floors and dirty couches and getting paid $100, and but it cost me 125.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, but this is what you love, and like life's a process, and I was it was something I really wanted to do. I love music. I just never hit my mark until actually the last couple of years. And you never know when that's going to come, but it came. And that's what's fun about music now is I'm sharing it like exactly where we started this conversation with people I love.
Yeah. And I think there's something, something that I love about your story that I never knew until we were talking just now was that you really had to sacrifice for the music. And I think there's something really beautiful about the success that you wanted to have in music coming now. And for so many people, I think they're finding that thing that warms the love that you're talking about is coming later for people as they sort of put down the things that they thought, big jobs, corner office, the car, and really sort of zero in on the thing that you're sort of willing to lose $25 on to do.
Yeah.
You met, and her name has come up like 1,000 times because she's your wife and she's one of my dearest friends. You met Toby in 1996, about that time, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. 1996.
1996. The years blur, man. I'm like, what year was that when they met? You know, like it's, ooh, they don't tell you that part.
Yeah.
But you guys met in 1996, and I'm curious, and I've never asked you this question, but I'm curious, what was it for you about Toby that turned your head for her? I mean, besides the fact that she's beautiful and she's super talented and she's stunning and all of that, what was it about her that you knew, okay, this is the person that I'm going to share the love with?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first time I saw her, she walked in a rock and roll club, and I was walking up the steps, and I turned around and I saw her, and it was the all-encompassing everything from oh my God, that's the sexiest woman I've ever seen, to also oh my God, that's the most soulful woman I've ever seen. So the whole thing there shined like a forest fire coming up the steps. I don't know why that was, but it was. But no, eventually I realized very quickly because I asked her we went on a date, and she was going to meet me at a club down in the East Village. And I was waiting for her on one side of the street, and I didn't see her anywhere. And then suddenly I heard, "Hey, John." And I remember just the way I heard that, like the way my name sounded coming out of someone's mouth. I knew like, oh, I want to hear that the rest of my life. And I turned around, and there she was, and she went like this, like a 1920s like dancer. And I was like, yeah, this is I want to be with this person.
Mm,
But she's just genuine, and um, I'm very lucky. If anybody knows Toby, they would like. She's just an insanely genuine person. She's also super loyal, and she's gotten me through like hard and dark times in a very genuine way. It's hard to get people through dark times
yeah.
without doing damage to either the person helping or the person hurting. And so, I mean, I'm just super lucky, and we'll just ride this out until darkness.
Yeah, I remember your first dates because she would come back to her place in the village and tell me about them.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I remember meeting you in those days too. She just had a couple friends, and I was very nervous whenever I met the friends because I knew that they would give their opinion.
I think I was kind of like this in the beginning. I was like,
I'm sure you were. I mean, I'm not the easiest person to be like, yeah, he's going to be great. I would also be like, I don't know. There's a lot of questions about this character.
no, but I mean, and when you have friendships like that, and I feel like that's what your 20s are about, are those kinds of friendships with people where you really start to build relationships outside of maybe your family unit that may have been primary relationships for you. It was amazing to sort of watch the transition that she went through when she met you versus the other people she had been talking to and dating prior to you. And that's when I was like, oh, this guy is serious for her. And the transformation that I'm witnessing in my friend as she dates this guy. And as skeptical as I might have been, I was like, this guy is serious business. If Toby is like shifting dramatically for him, not in some weird, like she lost herself. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is that shift that happens when the person shows up that's going to change your life.
Yeah, I could see that shift. I think what might have interested Toby, what the reason she might have been interested in me was I was a 26-year-old person, or 27 years old when I met her, and I had just been through cancer. I was not. I was pretty experienced in some pretty heady stuff. I think that interested her. Like, she was around the East Village scene. Nobody was worried about that stuff. They were worried about drinking and partying and playing gigs and acting and fun stuff like that, and staying up for 3 days straight and things like that. And that stuff had kind of, like, even though I was in a band and stuff, there was a big part of me where that had all dropped away,
Yeah.
And I think she, I remember being able to talk to her. She was one of the people that I was able to talk to about things. A lot of people wouldn't have wanted to talk about that kind of stuff.
No, you have no reference point for that when you're in your mid-20s. It's not even
100%. And it would have been scary. Like when she found out, like we thought that, I had done a lot of chemo and a lot of radiation, and there was the idea, I had been told that I was never going to be able to have kids. And and I was also told things like, about my longevity, things that aren't fun things. But they were things that I kind of needed to tell anybody that I possibly was going to be with. Hey, before we get too crazy, I do need to tell you a couple things that I should tell you. And she took that stuff really well.
I mean, it's that soulful part of her that you noticed, is that she, Toby was one of the few friends, is still one of the few friends, and we don't see each other often anymore because you're in Beaverkill, I'm in LA, so it's like a thing. But she was one of those people who was always there was no judgment, and there was never any lip service around that. That was like the truth. And she was like able to, like, we went through some pretty hairy times, and she was by my side. And I was by her side. And I think that's who she is. So it makes sense that, with what you came to the table with, that she was able to make space for that and not be afraid of that.
No, not be afraid, and also kind of embrace it and kind of be like, all right, well, cool. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember your wedding day.
Yeah. Turns out that I wasn't sterile.
You were not sterile because Toby was quite pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. We had a big party with a big pregnant, beautiful Toby, and we celebrated it. And it was the luckiest day, and it was a great day.
It was a great day. And I remember she came in on the fire truck, right? Or like, it was like a red fire truck. Her dad had the shotgun.
Yeah.
But
pointing at everybody.
We're all like, Doc!
Ah! Ah!
But the part that I love about the story that I did not remember until I was thinking about this conversation that we were going to have today, and it goes back to we got to talk about your bio, because I got the Reader's Digest Cliff's Notes version of your bio, because there's so much more going on. But I had forgotten that you and Toby left the city and that you built the house you guys were living in.
Yeah. Yeah. She designed it and I built it. It was great.
I mean, John, come on, man.
Yeah, that was crazy. It was so fun. It was so neat.
I mean, what a story.
But and we're lucky that where we lived, because at that time permits were very easy to get. Like, you couldn't do that anymore because the permit process and the regulations and everything are crazy. But at that time they were kind of like, oh, you want to build a house? Okay, send us a drawing. Here it is. We handed in a drawing on graph paper, and they're like, great. They stamped it. When the inspector came, we were putting on the roof. And we saw a red car come and turn around in our driveway and leave. And, I was waiting for the inspection. And finally I called the guy. I'm like, you said you were going to come and you never came. And he's like, no, I was the red car. It looks great. I'll send your, your certificate of occupancy in the mail. It was those days are gone, but we're lucky we got right on the cusp.
But how did you know how to build a house, first of all? Like,
oh, because like if you're an artist, you have to have a skill. I've been building things since I was very young, because in college I was a carpenter. After college I was a carpenter because I wanted to be a musician. I needed to work, because a lot of the time you don't have any money when you're a musician. So I'd been a carpenter. That's how I paid for college, being a carpenter, and so I've been doing that.
so, and we alluded to this previously, but the special guest star of your wedding was your daughter Lulu.
Yes, she was.
She was the special guest star. And then a few years later, Zelda shows up on the scene. And I'm wondering how fatherhood shifted you, and what have you found to be the most surprising part of it all, the fatherhood piece?
Well, real quickly, and this is a little complicated, and people might not quite understand this, but because of my experience having cancer, a bunch of emotional and psychological things had happened. And I became basically a drug addict. And I had some serious drug problems, and Toby helped me through it. And my kids were the thing that ultimately made me say, because I had lost myself, but I loved them, and they made me, the idea of who they were and what I owed them helped me quit. So I've been sober as long as Zelda's been alive. And so, like, the fast answer, the immediate answer to your question is that's one really important thing that helped, because they have just given me, I love being raised by women. And I look at it like that. I remember they've raised me, and they show me the life that I like looking at.
Mm.
And they're terrific. Each of them comes with so much power and kind of so much knowledge. And they've just given me complete presence. If that makes sense. That I've been present for their lives, and they've been present for my life. And in fact, now that they're both gone, I'm having to re-find myself, because they gave me such an anchor in presence. And that means things like taking them to school, if they're hurt in any way, talking to them, trying to help them through issues, sports, filmmaking, music, all these things. We were all present. And now they're both gone, and I'm trying to relearn my presence.
How did you overcome your addiction? Was it through sheer will, or did you do the steps?
No, I went to, so that's a funny story. I mean, I really, real quick, for anybody else who has a drug addiction, I was having trouble emotionally overcoming some issues. And I think some of those issues were when I was in the clinic, the cancer clinic that I was in a room with a lot of people doing chemo. We all did chemo together. We all knew each other. We all talked to each other. We all knew what kind of cancers we had. They were my age. They were older. They were men, women, all races, everything, all of us sitting in a room together, because none of us had insurance. So we sat in a room, we shot chemo together. And I think it was very hard for me, because a lot of them died, and I felt it was difficult. And I think drugs were a way, not wisely, but they eventually were just a way for me to keep down things that I was having a hard time processing. So Toby was there for me. She was very wise in the way she dealt with me. I think she knew it wasn't like my drug problems weren't like mean, they were a problem. And so she talked to me a lot, and I tried to quit a bunch of times, but basically, if you're a drug addict, when the way you quit is you quit in front of people, and then you sneak. And so that's what I was doing. I was quitting in front of Toby and then sneaking all my problems until eventually I couldn't, I was just, it got so crazy that I came home one day after being out all night, and I tried to get the key in the door, and I made a lot of noise, and she opened the door and the two kids were there, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm a complete drug addict, and I just can't do this, and I need you to, I don't know, I just need you to do anything. And she's like, good. And she literally was like, great, we're going to school and I'm taking you to AA. And I didn't even, I took my stinky ass self. I turned around, we walked down the steps, off to school we went. And I can remember walking behind them and feeling so ashamed, but also quite happy. And I felt like the smallest kid of them all. And we walked by Perry Street, which was Alcoholics Anonymous. And she had already done all this research. Oh, that's the other thing. When she opened the door and I said I was a drug addict, she said, good. Do you want to try to live at home, or do you want to go away to a program? Like, she'd already done all this research without telling me. And I said, I'd really like to stay home. If I could, I'd like to be around you guys. She said, great. And so we were walking down the street. They were going to school. She said, that's Perry Street. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. And you just stay there until they close. And that day, I went there and I stayed from 7:30 in the morning until I think it was like 2 a.m. Sat in a room.
How did your marriage survive that? Because that's a heavy cross for both of you. And then there were kids involved. So how did you guys?
The kids didn't notice. It wasn't like I was violent or like that I was doing crazy things. Like the kids didn't notice. Luckily, like Lulu, when I quit, Lulu was 5. If anyone would have noticed, it would have been her. I'd like to think I was, obviously I was a troubled person. But like there was never a big car accident, or there was never there was never some huge event that scarred the girls, luckily. But I think our marriage survived, number one, because of Toby's depth. And I think that, like we were talking about before, Toby knew this was a problem, an emotional problem, that I was not dealing with things. We were young. Basically, I think the real answer is that Toby's great. And she's a very solid, genuine, deep person. And I think that she knew that I wasn't a malicious person, but I was a problematic, that I had a serious fucking problem, and I did. And then the real problems, then the psychological problems came out afterwards. That's the other thing, is you can quit drugs, but then you gotta think through, well, why were you doing all that? And that's something else. Right? Why did you ever have a drug problem, Patrick? Or?
No, thankfully, because I've seen it, and no, it's not. That's why it's kind of surprising. I mean, it's not surprising because we both know Toby, so it's not surprising to me that you are still together. But lots of people can't deal with that. I mean, that's like, it's a rough road, because it's not just the addiction, it's the why of the addiction that people have to address. And sometimes it doesn't work out, because once you figure out the why, you got to go, because your life doesn't work anymore as it's been constituted, because the why shifts everything so much,
Yeah. For me, the why, not that once I quit, we only fell more and more and more and more and more and more in love. Like, so luckily those things. And also my rule was, somebody said something to me really early on that was very important. I said, I feel so guilty that I was a drug addict, and an alcoholic. And he was like, don't ever feel guilty, because that's what got you here, and you're here to become a better person. So never feel guilty. Just become a better person. And so, like, my rule has always been like, don't sit around and apologize. Just change. Just be good. Like, change your behavior. And always, always, always wake up and be a white blood cell. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't be a cancer. And that's it. And Toby knows that too. And she knows that I have never look back, and that's so important, to like just no mouth service, do service.
Ooh, yeah. You had in 2010, you and Toby packed up the girls, got in the RV, and that's when things really got interesting for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you shot rumble strips on the road. And I wonder what that, hey, why did you do that? Like, how did that even, because I was like, you had to shift everything to do that, like homeschooling, RV, like the whole thing had to start happening. So why?
Well, because Toby's career was tanking because, as I said before, Hollywood doesn't recognize the, the enormity of aging women. And I had been on a reality TV show, so I'd seen the behind the scenes of how to shoot and the technology. And actually, technology at that time was changing so that people like me, people like us, could make films. Like suddenly, the editing software was affordable, the cameras were affordable, the microphones became affordable. And Toby's a great writer, so she wrote a great script, and off we went. And the girls wanted to be actresses too. So it was kind of like super convenient. And we just hit the road and we drifted and we shot this movie and we learned so much. And then the movie kind of like not financially well, but was like critically, it did critically well. And so we thought, hey, this is great. Let's do it again. We made 4 dramas that never financially, like Toby financed them all, with her voiceover work and with her,
Voiceovers.
yeah, she was doing great with voiceovers, and me doing carpentry, but it was Toby's loot that paid for 4 dramas, and we just got better and better and better at making movies. And then we made a horror movie, and then everything changed. Then suddenly that was our career. Filmmaking was our career, but financially I was a carpenter and she was a voiceover artist.
How did you stick it out to get to the first horror movie? Because even if you have the funding to shoot it and to live, that is not easy. That is in no way easy to do.
Well, first of all, we all love doing it together, so that's the main thing, is that it was really fun and we loved it, and it's an art form. And if you're an artist, and I learned this doing rock and roll, where we started this conversation, if you love your art, you don't count the money you're making, you count the art that you're making. And that's what we did. We counted the art we were making. We were really happy with our movies. We felt like we were improving nonstop, and like the festivals we were getting into and the kind of press action we were getting with our dramas was increasing. So we knew, like, we felt good. And we just weren't going to stop. We just were not going to stop.
Could you have a scene? Did you see where it is now, where it is now, and where it's evolving to? Did you see it then, or was it more unfolding as you went along?
That's a really great question. For me, I don't know what the girls' answers would be. I didn't see where it was going to go. I just saw that I loved doing it. And I believe, like, I loved Toby's acting. I loved Zelda's acting. I loved Lulu's acting. And mostly I loved being out in the woods with them, or shooting scenes with them. So I knew that I loved this. That's really what it is I knew that I loved it and it wasn't going to stop. And they had the same vibe too. None of us talked about like, we need to make money, we need to do this. We mostly talked about how do we make a better movie. And actually, when we broke, the first movie that broke was just an experiment. It was for fun. We made a horror movie for fun. And actually, Toby was writing a script, so she wasn't really so involved in it. It was just me, Lulu, and Zelda. And we made this 60-minute horror movie for fun. And we put it on Amazon Prime, and we made our money back in like 2 weeks. And we were like, wait, what the hell is going on here? And so that was the first time really that we started having the money conversation, to be honest.
John, I said earlier that we were going to talk about your bio because I got the Reader's Digest version of it. So behind you is a painting.
Yeah.
That you painted.
Yes.
So now we have model, filmmaker, painter. So when did the painting? You're a prolific painter, by the way. It's
Oh,
not just that
thanks.
one. You're and and I love your paint because you paint cars, so I love cars, and I love your perspective and the colors that you use when you paint the cars. So how did painting show up?
I had painted my whole life. I had always done art, but quietly.
Uh,
And when we lived in Topanga, I thought, oh, I'll try painting. And so actually that was so fun. While Toby was doing voiceovers, it was nice because I got to work on my art and live at home with the girls and take them to soccer and take them to school and stuff like that. I got to be a stay-at-home dad and I got to paint all day. And so I really got into painting. And actually that worked out. It wouldn't have paid for everything, but it worked out. And it was, again, it's more about, like, I really enjoyed it. I really found, like, again, my presence. I
mm.
loved painting. But now it's funny because I painted. I never stopped. And hundreds of paintings. And but once the movies really kicked in, I haven't painted. But now I've taken my visual love, and again, it's like talking about music and talking about painting and talking about modeling. All those things have combined, and unbeknownst to me, it wasn't a plan, but they've all combined to make me a filmmaker.
Mm.
I mean, because think about it, that's just a frame of a film. It's a perspective of a film shot. The music is soundtrack. Modeling is acting. It's photography. All these things have just come together, and I didn't know this until suddenly we're making films. And I was like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm glad nothing I wished for came true, because what came true is better than anything I could have wished for.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
When you're creating, like, what do you see? When you paint a painting, you sort of have to understand where it's all going to fit on the canvas. And what is your process? Is it more
It's
technical or is it more intuitive? Like, how are you approaching the work?
always everything I've ever done is only trying to help things unfold in front of me. Like, it's
Mm.
definitely, I don't plan things. I'm like, musically, I'm not like a classic musician that's like writes a score or something like that. I sit there, I fool around, and sometimes just only junk comes out of my brain, and that's okay, including painting or filmmaking. I like to watch things unfold and see how they want to unfold, because that's really enjoyable, and it's kind of a dance with creativity that's much more me. Like, I was never
Mm.
good in school. I was never good at technical things. Like, even when I build houses and stuff like that, I don't go from designs. I go from, like, looks. So that's, I think, the answer is I love to help things unfold.
Are you ambitious?
Wow, that is such a strange and great question. Um, I think I just want a nice relationship with my family. I don't know if I'm ambitious, but I work really, really, really hard. Every day I get up and I work, but it's not because I don't know if it's because I'm ambitious. I think it's because I love being present. And work to me, like, I say I work really hard, but more, I have fun really hard. Like, this was not work. Painting this painting was not work. It was fun. Making all of our movies was not work. They were all fun.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm ambitious. I think that I love being involved in being alive.
Mm. When you look at Lulu and Zelda, so Lulu's getting her master's in Scotland, Zelda's studying. Is she still studying film or has she shifted up?
Zelda?
Uh-huh.
Zelda's now doing art history because Columbia doesn't have a film department. She's an art history major, and Lulu's a psychology major.
What do you think when you look at these two creatures who are just like stunningly beautiful, amazing human beings on top of that? So
Yeah.
when you look at them, how does that make you feel? Because they're half you and you were so involved with them.
I'm just super grateful that they're happy. Like, Toby and I always talk about, like, what's most important to us is that they're happy. They're whole people that are happy, and it's like, that's what I see. I see Lulu over there in Scotland going on hikes, the rain coming down, having boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, but it's always like she's involved, and she's like, even if there's hard times, she's trying to find her way through the positive. Like she's trying to find her way through anything positively. Same with Zelda, like just listening to Zelda talk about her day or her classes or things like that. I'm just glad that they're like super involved in a positive way and that they're happy, strong women.
And this season, we're focusing on the legacies that people leave. And I wonder for you, what do you think your legacy is or will be?
I can only say what I hope it would be because I don't know how people see me really.
Yeah.
My husband loved me and my dad loved me. And that's all I really care about. That's it.
Thank you so much, John, for today.
Oh my God, thank you. That was so nice to talk to you.
It's so nice to talk to you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you and all of it. All of
Yeah, I
it.
love you a lot, Patrick. I've known you for a long time.
A long
And
time.
you were one of the first people I met when I met Toby, and you are a powerful figure. You were then and you are now. And it's a great, powerful figure. And I love watching your life. Like I watched you go to Yale. You know, I know you met her in Oklahoma. I watched you. I think you worked when I first met you. I think you worked in like a nice restaurant. I remember, or no, a hotel. Like we went and visited you in some hotel, and you look all dressed up and fancy. I was like, look at this fucking guy. Excuse my French,
It's
but
fun.
it was great. Like, and I remember being like a little intimidated because your suit looked so great, and you looked so regal, and you were so well, like you were just like a force. And then suddenly you were like, oh, I'm going to Yale, and you were an actor. And then suddenly Toby's like, now he runs like these amazing spas. And I started to look at the pictures and I was like, I was a little envious. I was like, oh my, I want that job. Like, how did he get that? Maybe he could hire me. But you never would have hired me. I would have been terrible. I would have been fired.
No,
So, yes, I would have been fired so fast. You would have been like, John, I love Toby. I don't know whether I love you, but you are fired.
I love you very much, John. You have no idea. Uh,
That's great.
the way you've showed up for Toby and the beautiful people you've raised and how good you've always been to her and to the people in her life. Much deep love for you and your story and your journey.
Well, I feel the same way.
Very much. To those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. We all leave a legacy. Live your life wisely. Bye, everyone. Thank you, John.
Peace.